When my son Stephen begged to bring his family under my roof, I opened my doors out of love. I thought my spacious craftsman home would be a sanctuary. Instead, it became my prison. Slowly, they pushed me into the small back den, treating my house like an early inheritance and me like an unpaid maid. They believe I am too old and too desperate for their company to ever push back, but they don't know the real value of my silence. If you've ever been treated like a stranger in your own home, please subscribe, like, and comment. I need to know what happened. When a family treats a grandmother's kindness as a transaction, what happens when she decides to close the account? The grandfather clock in the downstairs hallway has a slow, heavy tick that used to comfort me. It was Charles's wedding gift to me in 1974, its dark cherry wood polished to a deep, mirror-like gleam. But lately, the ticking sounds like a countdown, muffled by the loud, vibrating thud of my 14-year-old grandson Tyler's bass speaker from the room directly above my ceiling. I stand in my kitchen at 6:30 in the morning, holding a chipped porcelain mug of black tea. The kitchen is crowded now, smelling of stale grease and paper grocery bags that aren't mine. In the sink sits my grandmother's blue willow-patterned baking dish. It is caked with dried, burnt lasagna from 2 nights ago. My daughter-in-law Laura had used it without asking, and like always, she had left it soaking in cold, greasy water rather than washing it. "Mom, did you buy the almond milk?" Stephen asks, stepping into the kitchen. He is 44, his hair thinning, wearing an expensive fleece pullover that he bought back when his real estate firm was still solvent. He doesn't look at my face. He is searching the crowded refrigerator. "I bought the whole milk, Stephen," I say softly, "the kind Tyler likes." "Tyler doesn't drink whole milk anymore, Mom. It's bad for his skin," Stephen sighs, shutting the refrigerator door with a sharp plastic click. He takes a handful of the organic blackberries I bought yesterday for my oatmeal and pops them into his mouth. "You really need to write down what we actually eat. Half the stuff you buy just sits there." He speaks to me with the dry, patronizing patience of a landlord dealing with a slightly negligent tenant. He forgets that 6 months ago, he stood on my front porch in the rain, weeping because the bank was about to foreclose on his suburban home, begging me to let them stay, just until the market turns. "I'll try to remember, Stephen," I say. Laura walks into the kitchen, her hair wrapped in a towel, wearing a silk robe that Charles bought me for our 30th anniversary. She had found it in the guest closet and claimed it because it was just sitting there gathering dust. "Martha, did you move my dry cleaning?" Laura asks, not looking at me as she pours herself a cup of my tea. "I left the bag on the dining table yesterday and now it's gone." "I put it in the hall closet, Laura," I say, my hand tightening around my mug. "I didn't want the dog to hear it." "Well, please don't touch my things without asking," she says, her voice sweet and thoroughly hollow. "I have a specific system. When you move things, I lose track of them." She doesn't thank me for carrying the heavy plastic bags from the dry cleaners downtown 3 days ago because her luxury SUV was running low on gas. She treats me like an invisible housekeeper who occasionally forgets her place. I retreat to my bedroom, or rather, the small den at the back of the house that used to be Charles's study. When they moved in, Stephen had gently explained that Chloe, my 17-year-old granddaughter, needed the large upstairs guest room because she required creative space for her high school art portfolio. My sewing machine and my books were moved down here to the drafty, north-facing den. My late husband's oak desk was disassembled and placed in the garage, covered by a blue plastic tarp that flaps loudly every time the wind blows. At 6 in the evening, I serve dinner. I have spent 3 hours making a beef pot roast, the scent of red wine and rosemary filling the halls. We sit at the long dining table, the one Charles built from reclaimed cedar. Stephen sits at the head, in Charles's old chair. Tyler is staring at his phone under the table, his thumb flicking rapidly. while Chloe picks at her meat with a delicate, performative disgust. "It's a bit salty, Martha," Laura says, setting her fork down with a small metallic clink. "And honestly, red meat is so heavy for this time of year. We really should transition to more plant-based meals. It's much better for everyone's digestion." "I used the recipe your father liked, Stephen," I say, looking at my son. Stephen doesn't look up from his plate. "Yeah, well, Dad's cholesterol was sky high, Mom. Times change. By the way, we need to clear out the garage this weekend. I've partnered with a guy from my old office to start a boutique listing service, and I need the garage space for a staging workshop. We're going to have to get rid of Dad's old workbench." My heart stops for a beat, a cold, heavy ache settling behind my ribs. "That workbench was your grandfather's, Stephen. Charles used it for 40 years. "Mom, it's a chunk of rotting pine," Stephen says, his voice rising with that sharp, defensive impatience he uses when I mention the past. "It's taking up valuable square footage. We're trying to build a business here so we can eventually get our own place. You have to cooperate. We can't keep living like we're in a museum." "Martha, we're just trying to make the space functional for the people who actually live here," Laura adds, her smile tight and clinical. The people who actually live here. I look at the four of them. They have been in my house for 6 months. They do not pay rent. They do not pay the utility bills. They have filled my rooms with their noise, their dirt, and their quiet, boiling resentment of my survival. They believe I am a safe harbor they can slowly dismantle for firewood, confident that an old woman has nowhere else to go. "I see," I say softly. I do not argue. I do not raise my voice. I quietly finish my tea and go to my small room. I lock the door, turn on the single brass lamp on Charles's old sewing table, and open my laptop. I open a hidden folder in my email. Inside is an appraisal document from Vanguard Historic Preservation dated 3 days ago. Estimated market value of the Charles Ridge Craftsman Estate, $1.4 million. Beneath it is a draft of a contract from a buyer who wants to purchase the home, cash in hand, with a 30-day occupancy close. The buyer doesn't want to remodel. They want the historic wood, the original leaded glass, and the cherry wood grandfather clock. I run my finger over the digital signature line. They think they are slowly evicting me from my husband's house. They do not know that the ink is already dry on their own exit. The morning begins with Laura standing in the hallway, her hands on her hips as she stares at the cherry wood grandfather clock. "Martha, we really have to do something about this ticking," she says, her voice carrying that light, musical sweetness that always precedes a demand. The chime went off at 3 in the morning and it completely woke Tyler up. He has a soccer scrimmage today and needs his rest. Can we just stop the pendulum? The grandfather clock has chimed every hour of my 49 years in this house. Charles wound it every Sunday morning at precisely 8 o'clock, his silver key turning with a heavy, satisfying clicking sound. It was the first thing we placed in the foyer when the plaster was still wet on the walls. "It's the heartbeat of the house, Laura," I say, my hand resting on the cool, polished wood. "Well, heartbeats shouldn't keep children awake," Laura says with a soft, dismissive chuckle. She turns to the stairs. "Stephen, dear, can you help your mother stop the clock? She's a bit attached, but we really need some quiet." Stephen doesn't look up from his phone as he descends the stairs. "Just grab the pendulum, Mom. It's not a big deal. It's just an old clock." I stand there, looking at my son, waiting for some flicker of memory in his eyes, some recollection of how his father used to let him swing the heavy brass weights when he was a boy. Nothing comes. His face is flat, preoccupied with his own survival. I have to open the glass door myself. I reach into the cold, dark belly of the clock, my fingers grasping the heavy brass disc of the pendulum. I hold it still, stopping its swing. The sudden, absolute silence that falls over the hallway is suffocating, a heavy weight that settles into my chest. It feels as if I have just agreed to let them silence Charles's memory in his own home. An hour later, I drive to the local market in my ancient blue sedan. When I reach the checkout, the young cashier, Jenny, who has known me since she was a girl in my school library, swipes my debit card. "Declined, Mrs. Ridge," she says, her voice dropping into a sympathetic whisper. "Do you want me to run it again?" My heart drops into my stomach. I keep a strict $300 in that checking account for my weekly groceries and my blood pressure medication. I pull out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I log into the bank portal. There is a pending charge of $84 from The Vintage Bottle, a high-end wine merchant downtown, and another of $92 from Oak's Grill. Steven has the secondary card I gave him 3 months ago, for emergencies, when his car's alternator failed. He had taken his old real estate buddies out for drinks on my medication money, completely confident that I would cover the gap without a word. "Just the medication, please, Jenny," I say, my face burning with a slow, eroding humiliation. "I'll leave the groceries for today." I drive home with only a small plastic bag of generic white pills on the passenger seat. I sit in my car in the driveway, the steering wheel cold under my hands, feeling the quiet, terrifying reality of being financially cannibalized by my own child. As I sit there, a large, dented pickup truck pulls into the driveway behind me. 2 young men in dirty t-shirts climb out. They walk to my garage, and a moment later, I hear the loud, screeching scrape of wood against gravel. They are carrying Charles's heavy oak workbench out of the garage. One of the thick legs is dragging along the ground, carving a deep, raw scar in the wet dirt. "Steven!" I call out, my voice cracking as I climb out of my car. "What are you doing? We said we would talk about the workbench this weekend." Steven steps out of the garage, a clipboard in his hand, his fleece collar turned up against the cold wind. He looks at me with that tired, defensive squint. "Mom, the junk removal crew had an opening today," he says, his voice flat. "If I didn't take it, I'd have to wait 3 weeks. I told you this morning before I left. You must have forgotten." "You didn't tell me, Steven. I was in the kitchen until 9. "Mom, please," he sighs, lowering his voice into that patronizing, medical tone people use when they think an old person is losing their mind. "We don't need a scene. The workbench was dry rotting anyway. It's better this way. Now we can get the staging desk set up for the new business. We're trying to build a future here." Laura is watching from the kitchen window, her face expressionless behind the double-paned glass, her fingers wrapped around her coffee mug. She doesn't come out to help. She doesn't apologize. I look at the empty space in the garage where my husband spent his winter afternoons, building cedar chairs and fixing broken toys for a son who just paid $30 to have his father's legacy thrown into a landfill. I retreat to my small den at the back of the house. My chest is tight, the blood pressure pills sitting on my dresser unopened. I open my laptop and write an email to Clara Higgins, the acquisition agent for the historical preservation firm. "Dear Clara, I would like to schedule the formal walkthrough and home inspection. My family will be out of the house next Saturday, November 19th, from 2 to 5 in the afternoon for my son's real estate association dinner. Please bring the inspectors then. No one must know." I look through my half-open door at the stopped grandfather clock in the silent hallway. They think I am losing my memory. They think I am too soft, too quiet, too old to notice they are erasing my life piece by piece. But my mind is perfectly clear. And next Saturday, The erasure goes both ways. By Tuesday afternoon, the kitchen is no longer mine. Chloe stands at the reclaimed cedar island, surrounded by bags of organic flour, expensive vanilla beans, and bowls of melted dark chocolate. She is baking French macarons for a high school charity bake sale, her movements chaotic and careless. "Grandma, can you wash this whisk?" she asks, her eyes never leaving her phone as she taps a timer on the screen. "I need it for the meringue, and it's got egg yolk on it." "I was about to make myself some chamomile tea, Chloe," I say, my hands resting on the edge of the counter. "Well, can you just do the whisk first? The egg whites will deflate if I have to wait for the dishwasher to run." I take the metal whisk and wash it under the hot tap. My fingers are stiff from the early autumn cold, the heat of the water the only warmth in the kitchen. When I finish, Chloe takes the whisk from my hand without a thank you, already beating the mixture. "And Grandma, can you wipe down the stove when you're done? I spilled some cocoa powder and it's going to get sticky." She treats me like a kitchen assistant, an unpaid line cook in the restaurant she has opened in my home. I wipe the cocoa powder in silence, watching her effortless, youthful arrogance. She has never known the cost of a house. She has never known the heavy weight of a 30-year mortgage. To her, this craftsman is just a scenic backdrop for her social media posts. The house is freezing. The autumn wind has picked up, rattling the loose glass of the storm windows Charles always meant to tighten before his knees gave out. I walk into the hallway to adjust the digital thermostat. It is set to 62 degrees. I press the button to raise it to 68, just enough to stop my hands from aching. Before I can even step away from the wall, Laura comes out of her bedroom, wrapped in a thick, cream-colored wool shawl. "Martha, please don't touch the heat," she says, her voice sweet but carrying a sharp undercurrent of control. Stephen and I looked at the utility projections for this winter. We really need to keep the thermostat at 62. It's much more sustainable. If you're cold, you can just put on another blanket. "The den has 3 exterior walls, Laura," I say softly, my voice barely above a whisper. The draft comes straight up through the floorboards. My feet are completely numb. "Well, Charles should have insulated the crawl space better," she says with a light, indifferent shrug. "We have to be smart about our expenses right now. Stephen is trying to secure Tyler's private school enrollment fee for next semester. We all have to make sacrifices for the family." I look at her expensive wool shawl. I look at the new mountain bike Stephen bought Tyler last week, sitting in the hallway. My physical discomfort is their sustainability. My freezing room is the currency they use to fund their lifestyle. "I see," I say. At 9 in the evening, I sit in my cold den, wrapped in Charles's old wool cardigan, the one that still smells faintly of cedar shavings and tobacco. I log into my bank account on my laptop. I see that my monthly teacher's pension deposit cleared this morning at 6. 10 minutes later, $50 was transferred to Stephen's account for fuel. He didn't ask. He didn't send a text. He simply took it, confident that I would remain silent, as I always have. I do not call him. I do not walk down the hall to confront him. Instead, I open the bank's secure portal. Using my grandmother's maiden name as the security key, I open a new, individual checking account. I route my pension deposit to this new, private account, leaving only the bare minimum required to keep the joint account active. I do it quietly, the soft clicks of my keyboard the only sound in the dark room. I am turning off the tap, drop by drop, while they sleep in their warm rooms upstairs. Suddenly, my computer chimes with an incoming email notification. It is from Clara Higgins, the acquisition agent. "Dear Martha, The inspection is locked in for Saturday at 2 o'clock. Our historic preservation team is very excited. We have confirmed that your craftsman holds a Tier 1 historical easement. This means the exterior and the garden cannot be altered or subdivided by any future owner. This historic status actually increases our cash-in-hand offer to $1.5 million. I stare at the screen, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. Only last week, I overheard Stephen on his cell phone in the garage, telling a developer friend that my double lot was perfect for subdivision once I was out of the picture. He was already planning to tear down Charles's rose garden to build 3 narrow, modern townhouses. He has no idea that the house is already legally protected from his greed. And by Saturday evening, he will have no house left to sell. By Thursday evening, the house smells of roasting lamb, garlic, and expensive rosemary. Laura has laid out the fine linen tablecloth, the one my mother hand-embroidered for my trousseau in 1971. She has placed our heavy silver candlesticks on the cedar dining table, the beeswax candles already lit and casting a warm amber glow over the room. I walk into the kitchen to help with the platters, but Laura intercepts me at the doorway. She places her hand lightly on my forearm. It is a soft, controlling touch, designed to look like affection. "Martha, we have some very important brokers coming over tonight," she says, her voice dropping into that patronizing low register. "It's a tight networking dinner. We're discussing the new winter listing strategy. We thought it would be much more comfortable for you to eat in your room tonight. The noise can get so loud in here, and we don't want you to feel overwhelmed by all the industry talk." She hands me a small blue willow plate with a single dry slice of lamb and a spoonful of cold potatoes. "I put some of the mint jelly on it for you," she says, her smile sweet and clinical. "You just go get some rest." I look down at the plate. I look past her at the dining room Charles built, ready to receive guests who will drink expensive Pinot Noir, paid for by the credit line they took from my checking account. I am being ushered out of my own sight, a piece of old clutter to be tucked away before the company arrives. "Thank you, Laura," I say, my voice steady and empty of any emotion. I carry my plate back to the drafty den. The lamb is tough and the mint jelly is cold, but I eat every bite in the dark, listening to the muffled sounds of laughter and the clinking of my crystal wine glasses drifting through the plaster wall from the other side of the room. By 8 o'clock, the laughter has grown louder. The heat of the dining room doesn't reach my den, but their voices carry perfectly through the thin lath and plaster. I stand near the locked door that connects my den to the hallway, my ear pressed to the wood. "Oh yes, we moved in back in May," I hear Stephen say to a guest. His voice is rich with a false, practiced humility that makes my stomach tighten. "Honestly, we had to. My mother, she's been struggling a bit since my father passed. Her memory is getting quite spotty and she was getting so isolated here. We felt it was our duty to step in and manage the property." "It's a massive responsibility," a woman's voice responds, dripping with a shallow, professional sympathy. "But it's so wonderful of you to sacrifice your own privacy to look after her." "We do what we have to do," Laura adds, her tone sighing with a practiced martyrdom. "We're just trying to keep her comfortable, but the cognitive decline is hard to watch. She's becoming so resistant to basic household changes." I stand in the dark hallway, my hand resting on the cold brass doorknob. Cognitive decline. They are constructing a legal narrative. They aren't just freeloading in my house, They are preparing the ground to declare me incompetent, to assume full legal control of this property so they can sell the lot to their developer friends. My own son has decided that the easiest way to steal his mother's home is to tell the world she is already dead inside. At 10 o'clock, the front door clicks shut and the guests' cars rumble down the gravel driveway. The house falls back into its cold, heavy silence. Chloe knocks on my door. She is holding her high school varsity jacket, the heavy wool stained with dirt from the soccer field. "Grandma, can you wash this tonight?" she asks, her voice flat, her eyes looking past my shoulder to the dark room. "I need it for the trip to the mountain lodge on Saturday morning. The bus leaves at noon." "The laundry is closed for the night, Chloe," I say quietly. "It's too loud to run the machine next to my bed." "But Grandma, it's dirty," she groans, her face twisting in adolescent annoyance. "It only takes 40 minutes. Just throw it in. You're awake anyway." She drops the heavy wool jacket onto my bed, not waiting for my answer, and walks away. I look at the jacket. I look at the dark streak of mud on the sleeve. I do not wash it. I fold it neatly and place it on the small chair by my window. Let her wear her dirty jacket to the lodge on Saturday. She is going to a weekend gala she won't be returning from. Before I sleep, I slip into the dark kitchen to check the paper calendar on the refrigerator. Under Saturday, November 19th, Laura has written in her sharp, precise cursive, "Real Estate Association Gala. Leave at 11:30 a.m., back Sunday afternoon." But under Monday, November 21st, there is a new note that makes my chest tighten. "Craftsman Cleaners, 9 a.m., clear out attic storage." They are planning to empty my attic while I am asleep, throwing away Charles's old love letters, my master's thesis, and my school library files to make room for Stephen's staging furniture. The timeline is indeed tight. The inspection on Saturday must be flawless, and the signature on the sale contract must be delivered before they ever set foot back in this kitchen. The stairs to the attic are steep, narrow, and dark, smelling of dust, dry pine, and old paper. I climb them slowly on Friday morning, my knees throbbing with a dull, persistent ache that has worsened with the autumn chill. I reach the small landing at the top, holding my flashlight. I want to retrieve Charles's old leather satchel, the one containing our early letters and his journals from his years as a carpenter, before the cleaners arrive on Monday morning to throw them into a dumpster. But when I reach out to turn the heavy brass latch, my fingers meet cold, solid steel. A brand new silver padlock has been installed through a heavy steel clasp on the doorframe. It is a modern lock, its digital keypad blinking with a tiny, sterile red light in the darkness of the landing. I stare at the lock, the beam of my flashlight shaking slightly against the silver metal. They have locked me out of my own attic. Every letter Charles ever wrote me, every drawing my children made when they were small, my entire 50-year history, secured behind a digital code I do not know. I walk back down the narrow stairs, my legs trembling from the descent. Stephen is in the dining room, setting up his laptop on my mother's embroidered linen tablecloth. "Stephen?" I say, my voice level and quiet. "Why is there a padlock on the attic door?" Stephen doesn't look up from his screen. His fingers fly across the keyboard, his face preoccupied. "Oh, yeah, I put that on yesterday. Tyler and his friends were up there playing hide and seek, and I didn't want them tripping over the old floorboards. There are some loose nails and the insulation is exposed. It's a liability." "Those are my things up there, Stephen," I say, my hand resting on the back of Charles's chair. "My memories." "Mom, you don't need to be climbing those steep stairs anyway," he says, his voice carrying that smooth, administrative dismissiveness. "Your knees are terrible. If you need something from up there, just ask Laura. She'll get it for you when she has time.
It's for your own safety, really. For your own safety. It is the phrase they use when they want to cage you. They treat my physical aging not as something to be accommodated, but as a legal loophole they can exploit to strip away my autonomy. They are locking away my past, so they can throw it into a landfill on Monday, and they expect me to thank them for the security. I retreat to my den, my chest tight, my breathing shallow. I log into my email and write to Clara Higgins.
Clara, will the Preservation Trust accept the home with the contents of the attic intact? There are 50 years of historical documents, school library records, and local archives up there. I cannot move them. 10 minutes later, her reply chimes on the screen. Dear Martha, absolutely. Our trust specializes in preserving local history. We would be honored to catalog and preserve the Charles Ridge archives. You do not need to move a single box. However, we have a legal hurdle. Our title company requires Charles's certified death certificate to clear the joint tenancy on the 1974 deed. We must have this document signed and notarized by Saturday at 5 o'clock to close the cash sale. I stare at the email. Charles's death certificate is in our small green metal safe, the one we bought in 1980 to protect our marriage certificate and the deed. But the safe is in the attic, sitting on the old cedar shelving behind the digital padlock. I look out my door at the stopped grandfather clock in the silent hallway. I have exactly 30 hours to get into that attic. I do not have a crowbar. I do not have the strength to break the door. But as I stand there, the front door clicks open, and Tyler walks into the hallway, dropping his heavy school backpack onto the floor with a loud, dusty thud. He doesn't look at me as he heads to the kitchen to search for a snack. I look at his backpack. Tyler is 14, and like his father, he is careless. He keeps his house key, his school ID, and his digital codes written in the small black notebook he keeps in his front pocket. I have 30 hours, and the first step begins with a child's backpack in my hallway. At 5 in the afternoon, Tyler is in the shower, the old pipes in the wall groaning and rattling as the hot water runs. I walk into the hallway. His heavy school backpack sits on the floor by the silent grandfather clock. My heart beats with a rapid, dry thud against my ribs. I have never stolen anything in my life. I spent 30 years as a school librarian, teaching children to respect the rules, to return what they borrow, and to be honest. Now, I am a thief in my own hallway, kneeling in front of a child's backpack. I unzip the front pocket with slow, careful fingers. Inside, beneath a crumpled bag of chips and a biology textbook, sits his small, black, spiral notebook. I open it. The pages are filled with messy, adolescent handwriting, video game passwords, and computer logins. On the third page, written in blue ink, attic lock, 1974. The year Charles and I were married. The year we bought this house. Stephen didn't choose a random 4-digit number for his lock. He chose the year of my marriage, the year his father built this life, and used it to lock me out of my own history. The cold, calculated cruelty of it makes my breath catch in my throat. I slide the notebook back into the bag, zip the pocket, and retreat to my den just as the plumbing in the wall falls silent. Friday night at 2 in the morning, the house is silent. The wind has died down, leaving only the cold, heavy fog pressing against the windows. I stand at the bottom of the attic stairs, my flashlight off. I climb the narrow steps in the dark, my hands sliding along the cold, familiar plaster wall. I reach the landing. I turn on my flashlight, its beam illuminating the silver padlock, and press the keys. 1974. The lock emits a soft mechanical click, and the tiny light turns green. I pull the heavy latch and step into the attic. The air is thick with the scent of cedar, dry pine, and old paper. I shine my light on the cedar shelving. Beside a box of my old teaching materials sits our small green metal safe. I pull the brass key from my cardigan pocket, insert it into the lock, and turn it. It opens with a heavy, satisfying metallic scrape. Inside, wrapped in yellowed plastic, lies Charles's certified death certificate. I hold the paper in my hand, my thumb tracing the blue ink of the registrar's seal. "I'm saving our home, Charles," I whisper into the dark. I slide the document into my pocket, lock the safe, and step out, securing the silver padlock behind me. As I descend the stairs, a thin strip of yellow light from Stephen and Laura's half-open bedroom door cuts across the landing. I stop, holding my breath, pressing my back against the wall. "We'll tell her on Sunday night," Laura is saying, her voice muffled but perfectly clear in the silent house. "The brochure for the Oakbrook Independent Living Facility is in my bag. We can explain that we've already paid the holding deposit using her pension joint account. Once she's settled in the memory care wing, we can bring the developers in on Tuesday morning to sign the demolition waiver." "She's going to be difficult, Laura," Stephen says, his voice tired. "She's so attached to this place." "Stephen, she has no choice," Laura snaps, her tone sharp with impatience. "The utility bills are killing us, and we need the cash from the lot subdivision to clear your old real estate debts. She'll adjust. She's 68. They always adjust." I stand in the dark hallway, my fingers wrapped around Charles's death certificate. They are planning to put me in an institution on Sunday night, using my own stolen pension money to pay the deposit so they can tear down my husband's house on Tuesday morning. My own son has decided that the easiest way to solve his financial mistakes is to bury his mother alive. I reach my den and lock the door. My cell phone on the table vibrates against the wood, the screen lighting up. It is a text message from Jenny, the cashier from the market. "Mrs. Ridge, I hope I'm not overstepping, but I saw Stephen at the bank today. He was at the manager's desk with your old pension statement. He looked really angry. I think he's trying to figure out why the joint account is low. Please be careful." I look at the screen. He knows. He has discovered that the pension money is no longer flowing into the account he uses. I have exactly 12 hours before they leave for the real estate gala. The clock has stopped, but the time is running out. Saturday morning arrives, cold and gray, with a thin frost clinging to the dry grass in the yard. The house is filled with the frantic, noisy chaos of packing, the slamming of bedroom doors, the heavy thud of suitcases being dragged down the stairs, and Tyler complaining loudly about his missing soccer cleats. At 10:30, Stephen walks into the kitchen. His suit garment bag is slung over his arm, but his face is tight, his eyes dark with a cold, contained fury. He closes the kitchen door behind him, isolating us. "Mom," he says, his voice dropping into that low, threatening register. "We have a problem. I went to the bank yesterday afternoon to check the joint account. Your monthly pension deposit, it didn't clear. The manager said the routing instructions were changed. Where is the money?" I stand by the stove, stirring my hot oatmeal with a wooden spoon. I do not look at his face. "The bank said there was an administrative update, Stephen. They are reviewing the joint accounts." "An update?" He steps closer, his boots heavy on my linoleum floor. "I need that capital for the holding deposit on Tyler's school registration, Mom. You can't just let the bank freeze our funds. We're going to the branch together on Monday morning. I'll handle the manager." "We can do that on Monday, Stephen," I say softly, my voice level and dry. "We will," he snaps, checking his expensive watch. "Because this is completely unacceptable. We're trying to build a stable environment for your grandchildren, and you're making things difficult."
We'll have a very long, serious talk about your future when we get back Sunday night. Laura opens the kitchen door, her wool shawl draped over her shoulders.
Stephen, we have to go. The traffic upstate is going to be terrible, and I don't want to miss the opening reception. Stephen looks at me one last time, a hard, warning glare, before turning on his heel. "Don't touch the thermostat while we're gone, Martha," Laura calls out as she leaves, her voice sweet and hollow. At 11:30, the heavy oak front door slams shut. The rumble of their luxury SUV fades down the gravel driveway, leaving the house in a sudden, magnificent silence. At exactly 2 o'clock, a cream-colored sedan pulls up the driveway. Clara Higgins steps out, followed by 2 men in gray suits, the architectural inspectors for the Historic Preservation Trust. I open the leaded glass front door, the wood warm beneath my hand. "Hello, Martha," Clara says, her smile warm and deeply respectful. "Thank you for letting us in." For the next 2 hours, they walk through my home. But they do not look at my rooms with the cold, calculating eyes of Stephen's developer friends. They touch the built-in cedar cabinets with reverence. They admire the mahogany wainscoting and the hand-carved molding around the windows. One of the inspectors stands in front of the silenced grandfather clock in the foyer, his fingers gently tracing the dark cherry wood. "This is an immaculate piece of history, Mrs. Ridge," he says, his voice hushed. "It's an absolute treasure." I feel a single tear slip down my cheek, warm and quiet. They see the beauty Charles built. They see the home I loved. They do not see old clutter to be thrown into a landfill. They see a legacy to be saved. We sit at the cedar dining table, the one Charles built with his own hands. Clara pulls a thick manila folder from her leather bag and spreads the documents across the table. I place Charles's certified death certificate on top of the original 1974 deed. "Our title company has cleared the joint tenancy, Martha," Clara says, handing me a heavy gold fountain pen. "The cash-in-hand transfer of $1. $5 million will be wired to your private checking account on Monday morning at exactly 9 o'clock. The Historic Preservation Trust will assume full legal ownership of the property at that precise moment." I hold the pen. My hand is perfectly steady. I sign my name on the line, Martha Ridge. The ink is dark, permanent, and clean. "It's done," Clara says, gathering the papers with a quiet smile. "The contract allows you 30 days to vacate, Martha, but our trust has already secured a beautiful, sunny, one-bedroom cottage in the historic district for you. It's on the ground floor, no stairs. There's a small garden in the back." "Thank you, Clara," I whisper. As Clara walks down the porch steps to her car, she turns back to me, her hand resting on the door handle. "Oh, and Martha, we have already notified the county of the Tier 1 historic easement. It was officially recorded in the database an hour ago. If anyone attempts to file a demolition or subdivision permit on this lot now, they will face a heavy federal fine and immediate arrest." I stand on the front porch, looking out at my winter garden. Tomorrow night, Stephen and Laura will return from their gala, holding their Oakbrook brochure, ready to evict me from my own life. They have no idea that the locks on this house will be changed at 9 o'clock on Monday morning. And the only ones being evicted are themselves. Saturday night is a rare, quiet gift. The house sits in the deep dark, warm and breathing. I make myself a small, simple bowl of pasta with olive oil and garlic. I eat it slowly at the cedar dining table, enjoying the absence of Tyler's loud music and Chloe's constant, performative sighs. For the first time in 6 months, my home feels like a sanctuary again. After dinner, I stand in front of the grandfather clock in the dim hallway. I open the glass door, the smell of old wood and brass oil washing over me. I reach inside and pull the heavy weights up with a slow, rhythmic creak of the brass chains winding the mechanism. I reach in and gently push the heavy brass disc of the pendulum. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The heartbeat of the house returns, filling the empty, high-ceilinged rooms with its steady, ancient rhythm. It will run for exactly 7 days. I will not be here to wind it next Sunday, but for now, it speaks for Charles. It says, "We are still here, standing firm in the dark." Sunday evening, at precisely 6 o'clock, the heavy rumble of the SUV in the driveway breaks the silence. The garage door rolls open with a loud, industrial groan, and the noise returns. Bags are dropped in the hallway. Chloe complains loudly about her dirty soccer jacket, and Tyler stomps up the stairs to his room, his bass speaker already vibrating through my ceiling. Stephen and Laura walk into the kitchen. They are still dressed in their traveling clothes, but their faces are tight, their eyes scanning the room with a cold, administrative focus. "Martha," Laura says, her voice sweet but carrying that sharp, clinical edge of control. "We need to talk. Stephen and I have some very important things we need to discuss with you. In the living room, please." I walk into the living room and sit in my usual chair, the small, faded wingback by the window. Stephen sits opposite me, his laptop already open on his knees, his face set in a hard, professional mask. Laura sits beside him on the sofa, smoothing her wool skirt with a slow, deliberate stroke of her fingers. The room is cold. Laura has already walked past the thermostat and turned the heat back down to 62 degrees. Laura reaches into her designer bag and pulls out a thick, glossy brochure. She slides it across the cedar coffee table toward me. "Martha, we've been doing a lot of thinking about your safety," she says, her smile perfectly polished and thoroughly hollow. "With the winter coming and the maintenance of this old house, it's just too much for you to manage. We've found a wonderful place, Oakbrook. It's an independent living facility, but they have a state-of-the-art memory care wing." "We've already paid the holding deposit, Mom," Stephen adds, his voice firm and carrying his executive authority. "We used the joint pension account to cover the registration fee. We're going to help you pack this week, and the movers will take your things on Friday. It's a family decision. It's what's best for you." I look at the glossy photos of Oakbrook. I see the sterile white rooms, the manicured concrete lawns, and the elderly residents sitting in vinyl chairs under fluorescent lights. They have spent 6 months treating me like a nuisance, using my money to fund their life. And now they are using my own stolen pension money to lock me away so they can tear down my husband's house. "I see," I say, my voice steady, my face entirely calm. Laura looks slightly unsettled by my quietness. She glances at Stephen, her smile flickering. "We knew you'd understand, Martha. It's really for your own good." Before Stephen can speak, his laptop screen flashes with a blue alert light. A sharp digital notification chime sounds, echoing in the quiet room. Stephen frowns, clicking his mouse. His eyes scan the screen, his brow furrowing into a tight, confused line. "What is it, Stephen?" Laura asks, leaning over his shoulder. "A notification from the county registry database," Stephen mutters, his voice trailing off as his eyes dart across the document. "That's weird. The title search on the house. There's a new filing. A Tier 1 historical easement was officially recorded on this parcel yesterday afternoon. He looks up at me, his eyes narrowing with a sudden, sharp unease. Mom, did you get some kind of mail from the Historical Society? Did you sign something? The grandfather clock in the hallway chimes 6 times, its deep, heavy tones vibrating through the floorboards beneath our feet. I didn't get any mail, Stephen. I lie softly, my hand resting on my cardigan pocket where my private bank card sits. This has to be a database glitch, Stephen mutters, his fingers flying across his keyboard, his face pale. A historical easement means we can't alter the exterior or subdivide the lot. It ruins the entire developer valuation. The property is worthless to them now. I'm calling the county manager first thing in the morning. He stands up, his chair scraping loudly against the wood. He has no idea that the county manager's office is already closed for the weekend. And by the time the office opens tomorrow morning at 9, he won't even own the chair he's sitting on. Monday morning arrives, cold and silent. The house is filled with a thick, vibrating tension that makes the air feel heavy. Stephen is sitting at the kitchen island, 3 empty mugs of black coffee sitting on the counter beside him. His laptop is still open, the blue light reflecting in his bloodshot eyes. He has been awake all night, his fingers stained with ink as he tried to find a loophole in the county database. Laura is frantically packing Chloe's lunch, her movements jagged and uncoordinated. I walk into the kitchen, holding a small cardboard box. I begin to wrap my grandmother's blue willow-patterned baking dish in newspaper, placing it carefully inside the box. Stephen watches me, his eyes narrowing into a hard, suspicious squint. Mom, what are you doing? I'm packing my grandmother's dishes, Stephen, I say softly, my voice level. Friday is moving day, Mom, he says, his voice carrying a sharp, warning edge. The movers will handle the packing. Why are you doing this now? I want to make sure the delicate things are safe, I say. We'll handle it, he snaps, standing up and pacing the kitchen floor, his boots heavy on the linoleum. I'm calling the county registry in exactly 45 minutes. This historical easement is some kind of clerical error. It has to be. I've leveraged too much for this to fall through. At exactly 8:55, a white utility van with the Vanguard Historic Preservation logo pulls into the driveway, followed by Clara's cream-colored sedan. Stephen looks through the window, his brow furrowing. Laura, did the cleaners arrive early? And who is in the sedan? I scheduled the cleaners for 9, Stephen, Laura says, her voice tense as she walks to the window. They shouldn't be here yet. Stephen opens the front door, his posture aggressive as he steps onto the porch. Can I help you? He calls out to the 2 men in jumpsuits who have just climbed out of the van. We aren't ready for the cleaners yet. Waiting your vehicle. We aren't cleaners, sir, one of the men says, holding a heavy metal toolbox. We're the locksmiths for Vanguard Historic Preservation. Locksmiths? Stephen's voice cracks, his face turning pale. What are you talking about? My cell phone in my cardigan pocket vibrates. A notification from my bank. Alert. Wire transfer of $1,500,000 from Vanguard Trust received. I look at the grandfather clock in the hallway. The pendulum swings. It is precisely 9 o'clock. Clara Higgins walks up the porch steps, holding a thick leather folder. She looks at Stephen with a calm, professional gravity that cuts through his aggression. Mr. Ridge, she says, her voice clear and carrying across the quiet yard. My name is Clara Higgins. I am the acquisition director for Vanguard Historic Preservation. As of 9 o'clock this morning, this property is the sole legal possession of the Vanguard Trust. Stephen stares at her, a hollow, pathetic laugh escaping his throat. This is a joke. My mother owns this house. She's senile and I have power of attorney. Any contract she signed is legally invalid. Your mother's independent medical evaluations from last week are on file with our legal department, Mr. Ridge, Clara says, opening her folder and pulling out the notarized deed. Her cognitive health is perfect, and the deed has always been in her sole name as the surviving joint tenant of the 1974 purchase. Your power of attorney was never registered because she never signed the waiver. Laura comes to the door, her face completely draining of color as she looks at the official documents in Clara's hand. Stephen, what is she saying? It means, Mrs. Ridge, Clara says, her voice dropping into a cold, polite finality, that you are currently trespassing on commercial historic property. The locksmiths are here to change the locks. You have exactly 2 hours to pack your personal belongings and vacate the premises. Stephen turns to me, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with a terrifying, wild realization. He looks at the cardboard box in my hands. He looks at the grandfather clock ticking behind me. He has spent 6 months treating me like a senile nuisance, completely dependent on the assumption that I was a passive vessel he could manipulate to pay his debts. Mom, he whispers, his voice shaking, his hand reaching out toward me. You sold the house? Where are we supposed to go? I do not answer. I quietly tape the cardboard box closed, the sound of the brown tape loud and final in the silent hallway. The dependency has finally cleared, and my son is realizing just how cold the winter is going to be. The hallway falls into an absolute, suffocating silence, broken only by the sharp, metallic clink, clink, clink of the locksmith's tools as they begin to unscrew the heavy brass hinges of my front door. Stephen stands in the center of the foyer, his suit garment bag slipping from his hand and pooling on the floor like a deflated balloon. Laura is weeping quietly against the wainscoting, her face buried in her hands. Chloe and Tyler stand by the stairs, their backpacks slung over their shoulders, their faces pale and completely bewildered. Mom, please, Stephen whispers, his voice cracked and hollow, stripped of all his executive authority. We have nowhere to go. My credit is ruined. No bank will approve a lease for us. We'll be on the street by nightfall. You can't do this to your own family. I look at my son. I look at the desperate, sweating panic on his face, the same face I used to wipe dry when he was a boy. I feel no anger. I feel only the quiet, heavy finality of a teacher closing a book at the end of the day. I reach into my small cardboard box and pull out a blue paper folder. I slide it across the cedar dining table toward him. I bought your old suburban house back from the bank on Friday morning, Stephen, I say, my voice steady and level in the quiet room. The one with the 5 bedrooms and the 3-car garage. The foreclosure has been fully cleared. The title of that property is now in my sole name. Stephen stares at the folder, his eyes wide and blank. You bought our old house back? Yes, I say. I used the cash-in-hand advance from the Vanguard Trust to pay off your outstanding mortgage debt. You can move your family back there today. The movers I hired are already on their way to transport your staging furniture and your personal belongings to that address. Laura looks up, her eyes lighting up with a sudden, desperate hope. She takes a step toward me, her hands reaching out. Martha, oh, thank you. You're letting us have our home back? You're giving us a second chance? No, Laura, I say, my voice dropping into a cold, quiet register that makes her freeze. I am your landlord. You will sign this lease. The rent is $2,000 a month, due on the 1st of every month. If you are late by even a day, my legal team will initiate immediate eviction proceedings. You wanted to manage my property, Stephen. Now, you will pay me to manage yours. Stephen looks at the lease. He looks at his wife, then down at his hands. He has no choice. He has no other card to play. He picks up the gold fountain pen sitting on the cedar table and signs his name on the tenant line, his signature shaky and small. I take the signed lease, slide it into my apron pocket, and pick up my cardboard box containing my grandmother's blue willow dish. I look at the grandfather clock in the hallway. Its steady, heavy pendulum swings back and forth, filling the space with its ancient, comforting heartbeat. I do not take the clock. It belongs to this house, and the house is safe now, legally protected from their greed forever by the historical easement. I walk out the front door, stepping into the clean, cold winter sunshine. Clara is waiting for me in her sedan, the engine idling warmly. I place my box in the back seat and climb into the passenger side. As we pull down the driveway, I look back through the window. Stephen and Laura are loading their suitcases into their luxury SUV, their movements slow, defeated, and silent. They are going back to the suburban house they lost, but this time, they will be paying their mother for the privilege of living in her shadow. I close my eyes, leaning my head against the warm glass of the window as we drive away toward my sunny, ground-floor cottage. The pendulum has swung, and the heartbeat of my life is finally my own again.